Welcome. My name is Gena Timberman, and you are listening to Timber People, a podcast about people who, like timber, are strong, build and create, who gather us together like fuel that feeds fire. People who support structures of our community that uplift and protect. Welcome to the show. It's a real honor and pleasure to welcome my sister, LaRenda Morgan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gena. I'm so happy to be here today to spend this time with you.
We have some good things to talk about, some really meaningful, important things to talk about, and also hopefully some fun and just how we know one another. And for the listener, LaRenda is a citizen of the Cheyenne and Arapaho Tribes. And I know you have done so much work as a Native liaison and in working in politics. And currently you are serving as the Governmental Affairs Officer for the Cheyenne and Arapaho Tribes. And today I'm really looking forward to talking about this new chapter, not just a chapter in your career and in the important work that you're committed to, but also a new chapter for Cheyenne and Arapaho, MMIP, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Board that you have worked so hard to create. And I just attended a really beautiful and special event that you had. It was the Red Tie Gala that you had at the Oklahoma History Center. And, perhaps we start out talking about that and your work in that, and would love to really dive into how we've known one another over the years. And it's just been great to be your friend and a family member in the extended Indian way, and also to be a witness to your commitment to these initiatives for our communities.
Yes, thank you. Well, first, for the listeners, I'd like to kind of talk about how I met Gena. My daughter, Raven, was an Oklahoma City, Miss Indian Oklahoma City princess. She was a part of the Changing Winds Cultural Society under Miss Shirley Wapskinney, and that's how I got connected with Gena, because she was involved also with the Changing Winds Cultural Society. So ever since then, we've just hit it off, become friends and sisters, and she's a big part of our family now. And so
I'm so grateful for that. And it's just been really great to see your kids growing up and to become the kind of people that they are. And we have a new grandbaby in the family, which is so much fun. And it's just been so special for me to be a part of that journey over the years. And we have some good stories. If we had longer today to go in about the late, great, wonderful Miss Shirley and what she contributed to Changing Winds. And I've always enjoyed being involved and a part of and just committed to the work that you all have done over the years, and how our young ladies represent.
Yes, definitely.
And that's so important to have ambassadors like these beautiful, graceful young ladies. And it's been really special for me to see Raven over the years as well as others.
Yes, Raven looks to you as her auntie, her Choctaw auntie.
I love it.
And now you're Choctaw grandma.
Yeah. What fun.
And Max loves his Auntie Gena.
Man, they are just so wonderful. I'm just so appreciative and just grateful and blessed for that. And, I see you are so great on social media and updating the different things that you're doing. And you're always on the move, and you're always involved in different activities and endeavors. And I know that creating this MMIP board, this new chapter for your people, has been really close to your heart for many years.
Yes. So just for the listeners who don't know, I was actively involved in drafting IDA's law, which is SB 172 out of the Oklahoma legislature. IDA's law creates a Office of Missing and Murdered Indigenous People within the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. So that law was passed in 2021. We worked on it for quite a few years, probably 2 years beforehand. We got it through the Oklahoma legislature. And Governor Kevin Stitt signed it into law in 2021. And so now we have an active MMIP office within the OSBI. The current agent there is Agent Joshua Peskowski. He's doing great. He is very responsive. He's fulfilling all the duties that Ida's law has enacted within that state entity. So, I mean, we have seen a lot of positive changes in Oklahoma because of this office having a person in that, an agent in that position to be able to help the tribes, help the families, help the MMIP advocates with cases, not only for missing, but also for murder cases, to be able to connect with law enforcement district attorney's office. And so that's been a huge impact on Indian country in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And I see it moving. Of course, things don't just, change overnight, but it is progressing. And I do see that even with law enforcement are becoming more aware of MMIP and the epidemic and the causes. I'd like to mention that our chapter recently in August, we hosted a law enforcement training in Contra, Oklahoma. It was a collaborative effort with the OSBI and a national training institute called COPS. Mm-hmm. The trainers came from Tennessee and Texas, and they came and they offered it was a national training. So we not only had people from Oklahoma, but we had law enforcement from Arizona, mm-hmm. Utah, Colorado, Kansas. I mean, there was a lot from out of state. And then we also had the director of the Colorado Office of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives, and that office is housed out of the Department of Public Safety in Colorado. Mm-hmm. So we had a very diverse group of people, not only law enforcement, but we had forensic analysts, mm-hmm. we had DNA specialists, we had anybody who has any part of investigations. So that was really big for us.
It's really important to learn about the law enforcement training and awareness activities that are happening all across Indian country, like the program that your tribe supported out in Concho. I know last November I participated supporting with the Coalition of Large Tribes up in the north. And I have to say that I appreciate what you said about it being an epidemic. It really is. And while there was a level of awareness in the 90s, I worked in the Office of Tribal Justice, and I remember being scared sometimes to answer the phone for calls about law enforcement if they were deputized to go in these areas, and many different issues surrounding missing and murdered Indigenous people. And I'm really grateful for the efforts of your community, your tribes, and other tribes and law enforcement, the OSBI, for the enhanced commitment to providing resources behind the law enforcement trainings, behind the searches. I'm also really appreciative of the social media impact that, it really does spread like wildfire when, especially like there are people that are posted that we know, yes. And we know their families, and that's really challenging, but it's important that we stay connected in the search and in the endeavor to identify people and to bring them home.
Yes, and I think that's an important relationship to establish with the MMIP advocates and the tribes, is that relationship with law enforcement, because they're the first ones that we have to call if there's an incident of someone missing or right. if there's a murder. Right. And one of the things that I feel has kind of been a barrier to tribal citizens is their lack of involving the law enforcement right. in incidences. Right. Maybe it's out of fear, maybe it's just dread, because law enforcement hasn't always had a good reputation in dealing with Indian country or on tribal lands or reservation areas. So one of the things that we have worked to establish is a good relationship with our BIA law enforcement, and we have a great BIA law enforcement office in our Southern Plains region. We have some fantastic officers that work diligently when we have cases. We've also established a good relationship with the OSBI, with the DOJ.
Right.
And then, I've personally reached out to law enforcement in our tribal communities, especially with the city of El Reno and the Canadian County Sheriff's Department, because we have a large population of tribal citizens in the Canadian County area. We've reached out to, different law enforcement, and that's important because I have seen a shift and a change in our tribal communities, with us having these MMIP trainings and with us putting out the messaging that it's important to report. I've had countless meetings with law enforcement about the lack of reporting. And I will say that through our campaigns and our initiatives with our MMIP chapter of, just putting it out there constantly, the importance of reporting, we have had a lot more tribal members report and call in and when someone's missing and say, I've seen her here, or I've seen that person there, or I think there's human trafficking at this house, or I feel like that that fear has kind of lifted, because they know that we're here working at the tribe to try and protect our tribal families and our tribal people. We have a big epidemic of opioid addiction
Right.
in our tribal communities, as well as alcohol and substance abuse, other substances in our tribal communities. And we can go on for days and talk about the root causes of those,
Right.
Intergenerational trauma, poverty, all of those contributing factors. But the important thing that we're focused on is public safety and making sure that we as a tribe, we are sending messages out in our tribal newspaper and on social media, in our trainings that we have. We've had lunch and learns. We've collaborated with the domestic violence program, with the transportation program, like different tribal programs to try and get messages out about here are the signs of human trafficking. Here's what to do if your loved one goes missing. Here's what to do, So we're trying to educate our tribal communities. And that's really what is like my personal passion, is to educate and give our tribal community the information that they need, so that, because I'm only one person.
Right.
And the tribe, often calls me anytime there's an MMIP or someone's missing, or they call the governor, they call the tribe. But I wanted to empower our tribal citizens, our tribal members, and give them the information to know what to do in case LaRenda's at home taking a nap, or on a weekend, or,
right. God forbid you have a life.
Or I'm off on travel, or I'm Washington, D.C., that they have the tools that they need to, and they have that they feel empowered to use their own voice to make that call to law enforcement and say, or to have that fortitude to be like, hey, this is what's happening. This is what I've seen. Right. I've seen this missing person, or I've, to report the things and not have that fear. So that's kind of my goal in leading the chapter, is to provide as much information. And one of the missions of our mission for our MMIP chapter is advocacy, awareness, and education for prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, I often try to put out as much information, because my role in the MMIP chapter is voluntary. Mm-hmm. It's outside of my full-time job. Right. And this could also be a full-time job in itself. I have a great board that, they all work either for the tribe or the casino. Mm-hmm. I'd like to give them all a shout out, which I have, of course, my daughters on the team, right. LaRenda Morgan, Jenny Whiteman, Amanda Pawnee, Roberta Hamilton, Karen Little Coyote, Susan Geary, and of course our governor, Reggie Wasney, is on our board.
That's such a great board. It really is. And, just knowing who they are and their commitment to your people, it's important because it could be a full-time job.
Yes.
And you said the word empowered. That word empowerment, resources create confidence, and just knowing direction, where to go, that's empowering. And we all have a voice, and we have this dual citizenship reality. We're citizens of the state of Oklahoma, citizens of the land around us, but we're also citizens of our sovereign tribal nations. And so to be connected with the resources and with the values, they're values that also connect us all. You brought up safety, but safety, family, community, those are important aspects of humankind.
Yes.
And for our Native people. And I really appreciate that in these trainings that there's a cultural component to understanding. It's the actions, the resources available, but also educating and sharing with others the aspects of cultural values that really resonate with everyone. We just speak about them sometimes in different ways.
Yes, definitely. And, one of the important things that I feel that people need to have in advocacy is understanding of the community and the people that you're advocating for. And I feel that's why we've been able to do such a good job, is because we have a variety of people on our board that come from different backgrounds. Like we have 2 people that are nurses, and nurses have to have a lot of compassion. They're very compassionate people. We have a tribal leader who uses his voice to speak on behalf of his people and also the MMIP cause in places like Washington, D.C. or at the state capitol. We have young people who, have an understanding of their generation. We have people that work in the casinos who, understand that whole system because, when I talked about, the opioid crisis and drug and alcohol addiction, sometimes, unfortunately, those are root causes of MMIP and they're linked to human trafficking. And so sometimes those things can try to set up camp at the casinos, So when we have people that work at the casinos and that are spreading the message and helping educate, and we also have a great, at our Lucky Star Casino, we have a great general manager and chief operating officer who are well aware of MMIP and all of these things. And so they make sure that the staff has appropriate training, and our tribal employees participate in MMIP advocacy events, as well as the casino and the tribe. So everyone kind of is working together, and they're aware of these root causes. And so we feel like not only educating the tribal citizens, but the employees of the casino and the tribe, kind of like we just want to cover all the bases to make sure. And so Absolutely. I think it's important that we have these board members from all these different backgrounds and areas so that they can, kind of be that voice and that representation, because I can't, even though I'm the chair and people look to me when things happen, I can't be all, do all, and, see everything. I have to have help. I have to have people that are working with me. And, that team that I mentioned earlier, they're very important to our success and their dedication and their compassion for people. And like I said, having an understanding of our culture, our communities, and what we go through, and being non-judgmental, because we do deal with, a lot of these scenarios that, say, for instance, we could have a missing person, which we have had, I don't want to say a whole lot, but we have had cases of people gone missing, and we find out that they're involved in human trafficking.
Right.
And, to be real honest, when this first came up and it was, mentioned human trafficking might be the culprit of this person missing, honestly, I couldn't really believe it. I was like, no way, not in Cheyenne and Arapaho country. I didn't really think, because we're rural, like there's so many small towns. And I just didn't feel like, well, that couldn't happen. That couldn't happen, but it's happened.
Oh, and it happens so much in rural areas, but also because of our location and our highway systems.
Yes.
And oftentimes throughout the country and the continent, when you have some rural areas where there aren't, employment levels are low, economic development, if you're not intentional about that, will present itself in ways that are not productive and positive for our people and our communities. We've seen that in areas of the state with the sale of opioids, the sale of drugs, meth. And we did a big Crystal Darkness campaign years ago about how it's impacting areas. Human trafficking has become an avenue of economy. And so that's why it's so important that, for the benefit of everyone in our state and our region and for tribal communities, is that we're proactive about identifying positive avenues of economic development so we can keep people employed and have the resources to strengthen our law enforcement and to strengthen our social services programs and to really empower our people to learn and to be aware and to be proactive and to present ways that can really prevent these things from happening.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's so important that, education is the key component into educating everyone, but to also kind of spread the message that, as tribal people, we're very, originally we're very clannish people, right, where we take care of each other, we will look out for each other. And although, in this day and age, modern times, right, we often are, not put in that type of community. Our communities are spread out. But as a tribe, we want to promote, to say, hey, watch out for your small community, look out for your neighbors, whether they're native or non-native, keep an eye out for your area, for your community. And so that's an important message that we want to share. That and I have gotten a lot of feedback from tribal members and tribal citizens that they are looking out now. They are, right, they've seen by example that, they see our chapter working with the OSBI. We've brought law enforcement into our tribal headquarters in our communities. We had that huge law enforcement training. And I remember everybody was like, LaRenda, what's going on? What are all them cops doing there? Like, why are all the cop cars here? What's happening? And I was like, oh, no, don't worry. They're here for training. And they're like, here? And I'm like, yeah, they're here for training. They came here. Gena, it was actually, oh my gosh, it was so good. Just, yeah. And it wasn't just tribal law enforcement. Right. It was, we had county sheriffs from, different counties across the state of Oklahoma, city police, sheriff's association, like there was so many, and tribal, and federal, know. And so we had everyone there, and then we had advocates, tribal advocates from different tribes, Comanche Nation, just all kinds of, like, a mix of people learning about MMIP and investigations. And we learned so much about DNA and about medical examiners, So we also, the tribe, as tribal people, we love to eat.
Right.
So
right.
We had, we had breakfast, lunch, and then it was a 3-day training. Yeah. So at the end of the 3rd day, of course, we're native. So all the tribal programs donated things for us we had a little raffle and drawing,
No doubt. I
and
love
the non-natives, they weren't used to that. They were like, what's going on here? And, like the Veterans Department brought over a bunch of veterans T-shirts, coffee mugs.
Great.
And so we gave everyone a little raffle ticket, and, every single person that attended the training got something.
Yeah.
And then we took them on a bison tour.
And I mean, it's beautiful to be out there.
Yes, it's so beautiful. And, we just kind of bonded. Everyone bonded. These different law enforcement officers met all these, different ones from out of state. Everyone was exchanging numbers and, keeping in touch. And they just said, we had a great time out here. It was all like good vibes.
Yeah.
Good vibes. And making a connection. And so our tribal people were able to see that, hey, the police are here and it's not because something bad happened.
Right. It's community building, and unfortunately and understandably with some aspects of, our historic realities, from tribe to tribe, different tribes and so forth, there has been, an us versus them mentality in some areas of different aspects of government. And so when you can do that community building and disarm, actually, that pun intended, disarm people. No, talk about law enforcement disarming them. No.
Yes.
With enjoyable experiences, there's a magic that happens when two things occur, and it's when people learn things and when they're having fun. There's some magic around that, and then especially if you put on top of that, build positive relationships. That's really special. And so what you're doing will have the positive ripple effects for years to come.
Yes,
no doubt.
And, I just felt like it was such a great time. And it was all for, the benefit of the MMIP families and the victims. And like I always say, prevention.
Right.
I hope that we don't have any more cases, but if we do, there's going to be people educated on what to do, not only us, but law enforcement, and they're going to understand the jurisdictional boundaries and how things work. And so, one of the things that we heard in the past of why sometimes cases fall through the cracks is because, the law enforcement thinks, well, the tribe has to take care of it, or, BIA is going to take care of it, but they don't understand that that citizen lived in the city limits.
Right.
So that case belongs to the city police department. Right. Or they lived in a rural area, but not on tribal land, so that's county.
Well, and just also the lack of communication around cross-deputization in different areas, even by well-meaning, well-intentioned people, just the lack of knowledge, of real understanding, and the fear of of botching the process because you're overstepping a boundary.
Yes. What I've learned is that if you reach out to law enforcement respectfully,
right,
and talk to them, about your concerns, you can build a good relationship.
Absolutely.
And you'll have a good rapport, and they will communicate with you, and they will, because that was one of the things that I did for my cousin's case, Ida Beard. Mm-hmm. Prior to her first detective was kind of the one that, I hate to say, botched the case. Right. But, for several years, there was no movement on her case. And so finally, I believe it was when I kind of got connected with my representative, and, Ida's case didn't really have any media coverage. There was nothing really on her except for what the family was sharing. And from some grassroots MMIP, groups, but nothing like on the media, like in the major news outlets but we got a detective, the second detective, and he told me, like, we talked personally, like after he got off work, and he said, LaRenda, I want to work as much as I can on this case. He said, I want to help solve this case. I will do my best. He goes, because even though it was just dropped on my desk one day. And they said, this is your case now. Mm-hmm. And he said, and I looked in, there was barely any information in there. He said, and the years had gone by, and so I have to start from scratch.
Well, for the listener, you champion Ida's Law in honor and commitment to your cousin. And what was the year she went missing?
She went missing in right around the end of June of 2015.
I mean, the significance of having, a family member committed to this effort on her behalf. I mean, it's so important and moving.
Yes. And, I kind of I understand now why, I was one of those tribal members too, that I thought I didn't have much information. I wasn't educated on, how law enforcement works. We as a family just kind of sat and waited to see what the detective was going to do.
Right.
Like, what were they going to do? What were they going to find out? We didn't investigate ourselves. We were just kind of like, well, my mother, my aunt, which was Ida's mother, their sisters, they would go to the, police department. And I know my mom called me and she was like, gosh, those police, they're so, they're so terrible. I don't know what's wrong with them. They're so mean. And, and I was like, what? Let me go see. So I went myself. Right. When I first went in, they treated me like I was the suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they made me sign this document that said that, when I went into this room, it's kind of like an interrogation room, and they were going to ask me questions. And I was like, no, I'm here to ask you a question. Right. I want to know what you have found out. He was like, well, I want to know all the information. I said, I don't know any information. That's why I came to talk to you. Right. And you make me sign this document that says if they find out I'm like perjury or, like lying, they're going to, charge me with a misdemeanor or something, something like that. Right. And I was like, so this is what my mom was talking about. And they kind of like, questioned me like I did something wrong. And I said, listen, Ida's my cousin. I'm here to get the information that you have found. I want to know what's going on with the case, And so I just kept going back and kept calling week after week. And finally the detective, I don't know if I just wore him down, like from his, like, cop exterior, tough armor, cop exterior. But finally he was like, that's when he called me and he was like, I want to talk to you about this. I am working on it. I am trying, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, okay. So I kind of broke him down to like where he wasn't like this tough cop guy to where it was him and his humanness, right, you know what I mean? Right. And so we connected kind of on that level. And so from that time forward, we were able to talk. And he would call me and give me updates. He would call me and say, this is the information I found. Do you know anything about this tip or that tip? I got this, And so I started asking our family members and he said, well, I have to start all over and I have to, several times they would kind of start from scratch. He'd say, well, I'm going to, get with another detective and get fresh eyes on it. And so even though we've went through that whole process, feels like we're getting fresh eyes on it every year. Right. And we went through this process. And that was one of the reasons why I felt it was important for Ida's law to be put into place is, obviously it has not changed Ida's case. Right. I mean, it hasn't solved her case at all. Right. But for future cases, we have educated law enforcement, we have educated the community, we have educated the state of Oklahoma and other states about not only MMIP, but missing persons in general, right. I feel has kind of been elevated across the state. And it's been talked about more in the Oklahoma legislature. It's been talked about more in the news media and in large cases, as far as, which includes natives. Right. Native cases.
So important.
And that's something we didn't see before. Mm-hmm. And I remember, somebody sent me something about Ida's case being covered in the LA Times. Yeah. And out east in the Washington Post and being shared and, about Ida's law. And so I think that, just having that information out there has helped bring awareness to the epidemic. And so now any officer that gets a MMIP case, there's no excuse to say, well, I don't know anything about MMIP, I don't know anything about jurisdiction, because now there is a resource at the OSBI to help you work through those jurisdictional boundaries. There are liaisons at the Department of Justice to help you work through those jurisdictional issues, or any law enforcement officer in Oklahoma can call the OSBI and request assistance. And there is a person there, an agent there to assist.
That's
so
incredible.
Yes, I think it's incredible too. And, I think too that other states, are expanding. I know that South Dakota had used Ida's law as a model for their state. It was passed through I think it was HB 1099, and Governor Kristi Noem signed that into law. I consulted with the advocates that were pushing that there, and they actually were very respectful. One of them called me before they, ran the legislation and said, "LaRenda, can we do Ida's law in South Dakota?"
Oh, wow.
And I said, "You don't need my permission," but being respectful, they asked.
It's important. You've been a real bridge builder in this aspect, and from legislative understanding, I know, and you were recognized by the Oklahoma, the United Indian Nations of Oklahoma, and by the legislature in the past. And I just want to say thank you for your commitment to that. And for the listener, you have tribal members that have played a longstanding role in the pursuit of solving these cold cases and other cases for MMIP. I can't help but recognize Harvey Pratt.
Yes.
One of your, Cheyenne Peace Chiefs historically, who is also, an artist, and just his commitment to forensics and the pioneering of his artwork and forensics that have led to the identification of the missing and murdered. And, it's just your family and your tribes have a really important and meaningful legacy for this epidemic. And I want to thank you for that.
You don't have to thank me, Gena.
Well, I know there are many families who would as well.
I feel like, part of why I felt so passionate about doing this was because I felt hopeless. I mean, yes, I felt hopeless at a time, because I felt like what can I do? What can I do for Ida? I've spent countless hours with some of my family members up late at night, talking and just rehashing and going over what could have happened to her. Where could she? Because she went out one night with friends, and she walked to the house where her friends were, which was only not even half a block away. And they said that she left that night, and they saw her walk back home. But from that point A to point B, she never made it.
Right.
And there's 3 or 4 houses in between. And so it's like me and my sister and my daughter Raven, we have set up late at night just trying to what could have happened, this, that, searching people's names up of her friends, of who she could possibly be involved with, or even the rumors. People have called us with so many rumors, and just going over everything and trying to, periodically look up to see if there's been any activities or sightings of her, or just, trying to, and just, it's almost insanity, I say, because we just keep on and keep on and keep on, and we're just not finding anything. And so this kind of helped me and some members of our family, like my daughter, my sister. It kind of helped us use that energy for good, to make a positive outcome. And so with that, it was able to say, well, just late at night, I was laying there and I thought, I hope if anyone else goes missing, this never happens to them. That their family members never have to go through this. And I know, there's even with family members that have been murdered. I talk about it sometimes when I'm speaking at events that I grew up next door to Rocky and Charlotte Pennington, and their daughters were the ones that were murdered at the state fair, Lisa Pennington and Cheryl Genzer. And, Rocky and Charlotte didn't live next door to us when it happened, but after it happened, they moved next door to us. Right. They had to move. And so at night, I would hear Charlotte crying. It was so heartbreaking, just her wailing and her crying. It was painful and I was they were in their house. We were in we were in our house over here, and I was in my room in bed. I remember being like in the 11th or 12th grade. Right. And I got up and I told my mom, I said, Mom, I can hear, Charlotte crying. And she said, yes. She goes, well, she's crying for her girls. Yeah. She's like, just try to go to sleep, pray for her.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. And to know that families go through that. Mm-hmm. There's people out there in that much pain because of, that losing their loved ones to MMIP. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I have, in a way, have that understanding, and so that I'm able to help people in those situations. And not only do I have the understanding, but the people that I work with in this chapter also have the understanding, because every one of them have been affected by MMIP, whether it's a murdered loved one or a missing person. So they kind of know how it feels. Right. And so that's why we're able to support the families, because, that's what I say. Well, I wish that, we didn't have MMIP chapters when Ida went missing.
Right. But we do now.
Yeah, we do now.
Your commitment and contribution to the mission behind the MMIP movement is, it's real testimony. I mean, in the face of the hopelessness that you faced in your family and the insanity that one could feel and the sadness and fear, it's a real testimony to your strength and courage as people. And so thank you, Yakoki. Thank you for being on the show today, LaRenda.
Thank you for having me, Gena.
Yakoki, thank you for joining us. Timber People is brought to you by the Possibilities Podcast platform.